Good day, everybody. Thank you for joining me on the channel. In today's content, we will be analyzing the recent crypto market crash and what could be coming next. Nothing that I say is financial advice. Let's dive into the content. Now, you will have to excuse me. I do have a bit of a bunged up voice. I've got a bit of a chest infection at the moment. But what I wanted to do today is look at several different charts to kind of scope out and get an overall picture of the market's health at the moment. Now, we're going to start off by looking at Bitcoin. And my overall sort of analysis on Bitcoin is, although the recent sort of crash where it went from 126k coming back down to sort of 110, although it's drawn back sort of 12% and altcoins took a massive battering, I do believe that no structure or no key structure for Bitcoin has been lost. Bitcoin remains above the previous highs of January 2025, this sort of green support bar here. And every time it does actually have a rally up into a new level of resistance or a new all-time high, it has this sort of correction before going on to a new all-time high. And again, this falling wedge correction back down to key moving averages before eventually pushing to a new all-time high. So at the moment, within this yellow circle, I think Bitcoin is in some sort of falling wedge where it broke out and it's actually back tested it for support. So if you look at these sort of trend lines here coming down on Bitcoin, you can see we was caught between the structure for several weeks. We got the breakout a couple of weeks ago, put in a new all-time high at 126k. Everyone got really excited, and then it pulled straight back down to the previous resistance line, which is actually holding a support. Last week's candle close of about 115k maintained above the 20-week EMA, which is this yellow line. Okay, we're retaining structure above this key moving average, which is a good sign. Although we could see further retracement, okay, we could come back down here, but as long as Bitcoin is above this yellow 20-week EMA and this red 55-week EMA, if you look back at the past two sort of macro corrections of around 20%, when Bitcoin did put in a new sort of all-time high at these phases, it came back and corrected to its weekly 55 EMA, this red line. And then it had another continuation up and it corrected back down to its weekly 55 EMA and the previous high. Okay, and then it pushed eventually to a new all-time high. Now we've come back to support, gone for a new all-time high and coming back again. There's just a lot of chop in this area. Now I do believe that what we're going through is something very similar to what we did in January 2024, where Bitcoin had this really impulsive move up and then within the space of 2 to 3 weeks, it crashed, I think about 20% before getting an explosive recovery. So if we are in a similar position to what we was here in sort of January 2024, and we're just here in October now, and we're in something similar, then I think that we're looking for the continuation over the next couple of months for a BTC top to be placed somewhere in November, December. And the targets that I'm looking at for Bitcoin is the 1618 at roughly about 174 to 175k. I think that if Bitcoin can get this final rally, okay, and dominance potentially does climb, we'll look at dominance in a second, because Bitcoin dominance going up with dominance overall will be a good thing in the near short-term future. But what it could mean is that, you know, there might be a bit of chop on altcoins, you know, for a few more weeks, although I don't think we're going to scoop as low as what we did already. Again, Bitcoin still holds major structure. I believe that the recent sort of fallout, again, amongst tariffs and other political reasons, was a lot of people just resorting back to Bitcoin. The strength of Bitcoin is resolute to the crash. Bitcoin came back 12%. Altcoins lost 70, 80, some even 90, 95% plus of their structure. So, you know, Bitcoin retains. If Bitcoin was to have lost sort of 98k, you know, I'd start getting concerned. But ever since we actually crossed over the 55 EMAs back in October, Bitcoin hasn't lost key structure. It hasn't lost its 55-week EMA. So at the moment, there's no concerns for me in that part. And although it might seem ugly and market makers have had their fun, BT structure looks for continuation towards 170k in Q4. And I think that's where we will see a top out, and eventually Bitcoin will start rolling over and capital rotation will go into the smaller caps. And then we'll likely see ETH pick up, we'll likely see altcoin dominance pick up, okay, and Bitcoin dominance start collapsing. But for now, let's have a look at Bitcoin dominance. Okay, because this is also a very important part of what's going on here in the sort of bigger picture. Now, amongst the recent crash, Bitcoin dominance has seen a rally. So you can see here it's had this really large wick, which nearly drew it up back to the sort of 64% range. Now, in all post-halving years for Bitcoin dominance, October has been a month where BTC dominance gets a rally. If we look back here at October 2017, okay, Bitcoin dominance had an increased pump, okay, it rallied quite viciously And then November and December, January, this is where it had a massive crash. Okay, now when Bitcoin dominance started to roll over here, this is when altcoins really started to pick up. So in October, it pumped up. Okay, it rallied up to about 64%, which is in fact very close towards the highs that we've placed in sort of June this year. And then it rolled over for 3 months and altcoins just went parabolic. Fast forward to October 2020. You can see that at this point, it rallied in September, October, November, December. Bitcoin dominance actually tapped out in December of 2021. Okay, so this is where Bitcoin climbed to those 69K highs. Bitcoin dominance rallied with it, okay, and then the capital rotation occurred at the end of the year. And this is where we saw altcoins pick up in January, February, March. I think some went even till May, you know, and at this point, this is where dominance bottomed out, and this is where we got the bear market. So always remember, okay, this year has been no different. Post-halving years, 2017, 2020, I think it was, well, I'm meant to be looking at 2016. Hopefully I've got my years right here. But on post-halving years, 2020, you can see. Now in 2025, we've also got that sort of Bitcoin rally. Now let's look at other October. You can even here in 2021 October, you can see Bitcoin dominance had a rally here in October 2021. In October 2022, you know, November marked the bottom, and this is where Bitcoin dominance started its rally. So there's been several occasions at tops and at bottoms where October is a month where Bitcoin dominance sees a rally. Now, in my honest opinion, where we are at these sort of levels, it looks like we could be rinse repeating something similar of a double top compared to last cycle. So last cycle had this sort of double top here, okay, where it put a local high in, retraced, ran up to a lower high, and then crashed, okay? And this was alt season in 2021. Remember, when Bitcoin dominance is depreciating, this is alt season, okay? So this is where alt season is occurring, where Bitcoin dominance is depreciating. Excuse me. Now, if we look at this year, Bitcoin dominance, it's got a local top at sort of 66%, and it looks like Bitcoin dominance could still climb here, potentially with Bitcoin as Bitcoin appreciates to a lower high, okay, a double top, and then get the rollover going into 2026. Okay, so there is a potential, again, with October being the sort of month that we do see relief on Bitcoin dominance. It's been no difference this year. It's just whether this wick is going to get filled and, you know, Bitcoin dominance continues here and altcoins stay a bit shaky for a few weeks and then it topples over. Okay, it could already be the point where we're looking for that rollover, because looking at the weekly chart, looking at the weekly chart, I do believe that Bitcoin dominance is running into key moving averages that are a strong level of resistance. So it put in the 66% high, it lost its 20 and 55, and now it's had a rally back into them. So Bitcoin dominance may reject at 60% here, and in November, December, roll over and start that cataclysmic crash, which would be the alt season. Okay, but there is a strong potential that it could break out, place a lower high, climb with Bitcoin. Altcoins remain a bit shaky as you know, sentiment still remains risk off. And then eventually in December, this is where we see the major capital rotation. It's a tough call at the moment, but nonetheless, October is once again post-halving years proven to be a point where Bitcoin dominance sees relief. And we've seen a massive altcoin decline with that. Now looking at Ethereum, okay, Ethereum also has some very bullish structure at the moment. It's above its key macro EMAs, and really and truly, it hasn't actually blinked too much in consideration to other altcoins. You know, ETH's strength, I think, is not to be ignored here. It has a sort of ascending triangle pattern where it's got this higher low structure since 2022, been building higher lows, and it's got this horizontal level of resistance. So this is some sort of ascending triangle, okay, where you're caught between support, resistance, support, and you're coiling up. And once ETH gets a break and healthy backtest, I think this is where it pushes to 10 to 13K. So at the moment, this is all chop for Ethereum, in my honest opinion. Now, it could start coming back, okay? It could start retracing a little bit deeper here. And if it does start losing sort of 3.5K, then I do think that there is a potential to come back to a higher low before eventually getting the break. And again, this is where altcoins could still suffer for the next few weeks going into Q4. Again, that's to say that Bitcoin dominance picks up with Bitcoin to new all-time highs. If Ethereum struggles to keep up, then it could retrace deeper. But honestly, at this point of the cycle, I think this is where ETH is showing significant strength, and it could continue to rally back and forth with Bitcoin and eventually then start pushing on to those sort of new local high targets. I think I was looking at of about 10 to 13K for ETH. I've been sort of analyzing. So if ETH can sort of hold on tight here and hold above sort of 3.5K, I do think it has the potential to push towards 10 to 13 going into Q4, potentially Q1. Now, Ethereum Bitcoin is also bottomed out, okay? Just like it did last cycle, it bottomed out in December 2019. Right here, we sort of bottomed out in March 2025, April 2025. But you can see the trajectory has been beautiful. Now, ETH Bitcoin has run into a major level of resistance at the 0.50 fib, which is why we've seen a week or two's pullback, but it does have support in the 0.03 range and 0.027. So any further decline in ETH against Bitcoin, pulling it back to a key level of support, pulling Ethereum back down, as I said, potentially over the next sort of week or two, just holding it down here at these 3.6 to 3.5k levels. This is where we could see Ethereum Bitcoin come back, okay, for another week or two, and then start to look for its trajectory higher, back up to the previous highs sort of from 2021, I think we're looking at here. Yeah, November 2021. So I think ETH Bitcoin has bottomed out. It's just having a healthy correction before continuation, just like it did at this point, healthy correction before continuation. And this is where Ethereum is starting to outperform Bitcoin, which is good for altcoins. So this still on this chart looks nothing like a cool off. So far, Bitcoin is above its bull market support band, its key EMAs. Bitcoin dominance has had a rally post halving years in October, and this year has been no different. Ethereum is holding a key level of structure and is looking really, really strong here. Above sort of 3.5k is bullish. Ethereum Bitcoin is just in a sort of sideways corrective phase, looking for a low before continuation, in my opinion, which is good for altcoins. And now heading to the DXY. Okay, the DXY crashing is good for crypto. The strength of the dollar going up is bad for crypto, in simple terms. Now, the DXY lost the key level of support in April, and since then it's had a couple of rallies, but it's failing to get back above this previous level of support, roughly at levels of 100. So if we start seeing DXY continue to struggle breaking up here going into Q4 and not getting above and rejecting, coming back down to said levels of sort of 88, then this is where, again, going in confluence with sort of Bitcoin dominance. If Bitcoin dominance taps out at these highs and then rolls over, this would likely be confluence with the DXY losing strength and us getting an alt season coming into Q4, potentially Q1 of 2026. Now, USDT dominance, okay, is still in a path which is waiting for a decision. Now, this is the dominance of Tether. Okay, so Tether's dominance, we also want to drop, which means that if Tether's dominance drops, people are finding altcoins more of a safer bet. They're becoming risk on, meaning that we're getting more of an outlook of a stronger altcoin market. So essentially, we want to see in this triangle build up, we want to see dominance roll over in the next coming months back down to key levels of support, sort of at around sort of 2%. And then this would be really good for altcoins if we get that rollover as well. So you can see a lot of charts are on the brink of making their decision, that it hasn't actually happened yet. Now, total one, okay, which is the total market cap. You come up here and type in your symbols, which is the total market cap excluding Bitcoin. Okay, the total chart is everything. I do apologize. Everything in the crypto space, which currently sits at around $3.8 trillion. Now looking at, am I looking at total two? What am I looking at? I'm looking at total one, am I? 3.8. Yeah. Now total has this resistance or previous resistance, this faded gray line here, and total sits above this gray line. So it's still, even after the decline, it still sits above this previous level of resistance. Okay, you can still see it's sitting above it. We did have a nasty wick down, but nonetheless, it's holding above sort of 3.5 to 3.6 trillion and above this resistance line, which signals great strength and potential for a continuous climb. I think this is total three. Total three is also above a sort of inverse head and shoulders neckline here. Okay, it's got this inverse head and shoulders, and around sort of 1 trillion is a key level of support. And even with the wick over the last week, you can see it's had a wick drawdown, but the candle close still retains structure above 1 trillion, sitting at 1.06. So I think that this is still, albeit considered a horrendous decline for altcoins. These wick grabs may just be the last of the market makers' fun to shake people out and really look for continuation higher. Look at this down here. Look at these wick grabs in March 2020. This was COVID. Okay, and this would have felt extremely fearful because Bitcoin was building this really nice structure here, building this higher lows. It went up really high and then just pooed itself. Not Bitcoin, sorry, total three. Okay, which is all charts excluding Bitcoin, Ethereum. So I think what we're looking at here is potentially a very similar play to COVID. And we've just had this drawback over the last week or two, and we're going to now send off in this parabolic run for altcoins. Okay, so this chart going up is great for alts, and that's what we want to see when Bitcoin dominance and the sort of DXY and USDT dominance decline. We want to see altcoins and the totals pick up as Bitcoin dominance and DXY crash. Okay, and that would be a great sign and some signals. Now, there's also total 3 ESBTC. Now, what this chart is a very good chart because this removes Bitcoin, Ethereum, and stable coins. Okay, so this is literally the whole market without Bitcoin, Ethereum, and stables. And you can see that it is caught between a level of resistance and a level of support. And at the moment, it's just had a wick down, again, which is drawn below the trend line. But we've had previous wicks. Again, if you look at sort of December 2021, January 2020, this is where we saw a major increase after a sharp decline. And what we've had now is a sharp decline. So again, a couple of weeks where we pull back to the trend line here may not be off the cards before essentially seeing that impulsive break. And this is the break that we're looking for, where altcoins will get another parabolic run going into Q4, potentially into to 2026. So I'm expecting, because we're at these lows, to bounce up here, and this is where altcoins appreciate on these sort of rallies. Okay, so that's my kind of overall outlook. Bitcoin has lost no key structure. Bitcoin dominance has had a rally, and altcoins have, you know, a lot of fear shaking people out the markets. Fair play if you're still here and holding on tight. Ethereum, no loss of structure. Ethereum, Bitcoin, corrective phase, very similar to what it went through in 2020 before continuation, in my honest opinion. So no loss of structure there. DXY is running into resistance, which is good for crypto. USDT is squeezing into a corner, and I think a rollover is more than likely at this point because it's struggling with lower highs, okay, which is good for crypto. And then total 2, total 3, and total 3 ESBTC, so many charts, sorry, all look good for a breakout. So in my honest opinion, this was one of the biggest shakeouts in history. And if you're leverage trading, guys, I do apologize, but again, this is sometimes what happens. These sort of events are uncontrollable, but they're there and designed to keep you on the floor. So don't let the market shake you out. We're so close. The charts point to much higher for the overall altcoin market and the crypto space. There is no loss of structure. No loss of structure. I hope you've enjoyed the content from Chart Nerd TA. Take care. Peace out.